You guys already all know about it.
Oh.
Again.
We like
I don't want building,
what it's all about. Please waste our time. We need more butt scoop.
Second Life 2.0. I basically came up with the idea of something involving Second Life that we can talk about that is not an intro to what it is or what it's about. We all pretty much know.
I got the perfect
I actually
thing
talked
for
to
playing.
Lyndon about that. Since
Oh, I get hidden camera.
Manifest Messenger. He says the Mega Crims issue, it's on the minds of the Lindens. However, they want to let the sim software settle down first before they try to stress it out with expanding the Crim limits.
Yeah,
The
that's
Crim size limits.
Golden Labs don't care right now.
Well, they have to switch it over to Havoc 4 for the software.
Second Life would have died.
Service itself, they solve a lot of issues with the Havoc 1, breaking the sims, causing them to go down. The sims were much better currently now, but they still have to say about other things breaking things now. They were testing it extensively. There are also Manifest Messenger that
we can talk about the specifics. They did allocate about an hour and a half when I asked for 30 to 45 minutes for me to talk, so we're definitely going to have a little more time than we need. So, I actually initially had asked for a meet and greet event, and that never really came together. So, or maybe at the end of this, if everybody wants to, talk or whatever. Obviously, we're all Second Lifers. We all probably know each other on Second Life, or at least come across each other. We can kind of commingle with it. The idea that I had for the panel today, or my little presentation today, because it's really not much of a panel. We got Scotty here. I'm sure he'll be doing whatever it is he's actually going to be doing. So, like maybe behind going like this for a while or something. So, one of the things that we've found in Second Life is that for some reason, unlike a lot of the other social areas that you've seen in furry, it's not really that marginalized. It's interesting the kind of slightly broader acceptance things have had there. I mean, we have sold lots of avatars to people who are not furries, but they still love them just because they're cool. And that's something that when we first started out, we really never anticipated. So I began to think, why is it that furry is so marginalized? And I'm sure we can have some ideas there, but why is it about what is it about Second Life that seems to be kind of breaking that down and making it more accessible again? So I just wanted to have kind of a little bit on that. Obviously, why is it marginalized kind of in the first place? I'm sure we can think of a few reasons.
What do you?
Some probably bigger than others, but there's obviously been plenty of stuff on television.
I still can't have a human avatar that talks like that.
Well, I mean, actually, even before the Second Life CSI, there was obviously a furry convention CSI, which I'm not sure how many people have seen, but that was obviously a little special. That made me laugh nonstop. There's obviously been any number of things on MTV, on Wired, and everything else that is kind of, they've been a little bit of, not the best overall coverage, and they tended to have their little viewpoints. So,
I love the joystick they had in that episode.
oh yeah.
I thought that huge skeleton that breathed fire was awesome.
Yeah, where do we find out on Second Life?
Yeah. And one of the interesting things is there was a certain point when actually we turned on the TV and we saw something like this. And I don't know about you guys, I've talked about it in some of the earlier panels, but I had a heart attack just about when I, turn on Fox News and there's my avatar staring back at me. So, I'd play the whole thing, but unfortunately there's no way my laptop is going to be able to fill the area with sound. So, suffice to say, what was really interesting is they really were actually very positive about Second Life. It was not the kind of thing that you would normally see on a news program where they're kind of like going, oh my God, the weirdos are here, or anything like that. It was, it was honestly very positive. They talked about making money. They talked about the freedom of expression. And they panned around our avatars and they panned around our whole area, and never once was the word furry even mentioned. And I went, wait a minute, this is really odd. There's news coverage of this, and it's not slanted, it's not anything, it's come from, you know, it's somebody here who's trying to get out of
Could try staying over a little.
But,
Thank you.
so here's this idea, you have this mainstream media, it's covering Second Life and even covering some of the furry things that are happening in Second Life, and they're not really down on it. They're not really talking about all the problems and all these other stereotypes or anything. It was just overall good coverage. So, I mean, we had this idea, well, you know, if we can get good coverage here, why can't we get good coverage in general? I mean, if you look at some of the other places on the web and in the media, there's a certain kind of perception of what being furry is that maybe or maybe not actually reflects what it is for a lot of us. That's actually a Burger King chicken, I believe. You used to be able to type certain commands in there and the chicken would do them for you.
It looks dead.
Yeah, it's pretty scary actually.
Look at him on top of it.
So yeah, I mean, that's kind of what people expect with furriness. If no one's ever heard of or met a furry themselves, you know, they go and see the submissivechicken.com. That's probably about what their expectations, that's where they are. You know, this is going to be meeting. So I was like, you know, okay, well, what does the general world think furry is? I mean, this isn't what it is to me. I don't know what it is to other people, but you know, what is it to people? So I figure, you know, I'll go to Wikipedia and I'll look it up. So that's, you know, if you look it down at the furry, it's an informal member of the furry fandom. That's really informative. You know, thank you, Wiki.
Well, did you check WikiFur? It probably does a better job. Had to do it. I had to do a plug for WikiFur.
There you go.
You have these things. I mean, how do you explain it? Obviously, this is not how you explain it to people. And is there a better way? I'm not sure. You know, it's something that it's always kind of frustrated me that there's this word that's been invented and no one really has ever been able to define it well. But, you know, it usually seems to end up being kind of marginalizing things. And I'm like, well, if you look around, it's not like this is the only fan group that has had its kind of marginalization and people looking at it a little funny. I mean, there's been this
Hey, that speaker looks familiar.
They're not always, science fiction was not always the coolest thing to be a fan of for a while. I mean, it was pretty out in the fringes for a long time. You know, there's fantasy guys. And
I like the stick.
That's also been kind of out there, you know, the elves and the ogres and the orcs. And, you know, people kind of look at them a little weird too for a while. There's anime stuff.
Shoot me now.
Something I found interesting about some of these other things is that, yeah, there's still some people out, kind of way out in outer space on these things, especially in the sci-fi, but it's overall kind of society and every a random Joe on the street, they kind of know it's there and they kind of accept it. And heck, they probably even watch some of the different things or enjoy some of the products of those different fandoms or fan groups now. You know, there's science fiction. Obviously, there's one of the most popular series on television right now is a science fiction series. And it is doing amazingly well. It's Battlestar Galactica. You know, it's a remake, but it's literally, I think, quadrupled the ratings of that network. And it's amazing to me that, you know, here's this network airing what was supposed to have really been a niche show, and it's now beating almost every primetime slot that runs against it. So, you know, obviously there's been some inroads there. You know, it's okay to be a fan of Battlestar Galactica. You're not going to have people necessarily making fun of you for it these days.
You know, there are guys on the show.
Hey, I'm not complaining.
Yeah, but they have a habit of wanting to portray the women.
So also, you know, there's been a lot of fantasy stuff has been pretty mainstream too. It's pretty amazing, actually, the number of
Starbuck
people
being a girl, for
who
example?
are devoted fans of this movie, or who maybe have an
Starbuck
account
being
on
a girl,
something
for
called
example?
WoW that's out there. And, you know, that's a giant group that's growing too. And it's like, wow, these people also seem like they've had, something's made it more acceptable, more understandable. Something has really kind of brought that whole fandom more forward and less out of the kind of, you know, more to the public eye and less out of the back closet, as it were. You know, anime too has had certain
Good shot.
the genre that it's in. I mean, there are movies now that come out of Studio Ghibli that now play across 2,000 screens in America the second they're released. And that just blew me away that, you know, God, I remember when you were in some guy's closet watching VHS tapes of like Speed Racer or whatever else, and it was an amazing thing then.
That would be, I can't remember the name, Japanese or.
You mean Otaku?
Miyazaki. Yeah.
That's Princess Mononoke.
So,
Yeah.
what happened with all these things is that there have been these gigantic, I guess the way you describe it is kind of breakthrough media. Things that have brought that kind of fan genre out from just the people that initially created it and out into the public eye. You know, things that have started small, but then these other things have made it accessible. So even if you've never heard of certain types of fantasy, you may have a WoW account. You know what I mean? Even if you've never read Lord of the Rings, you may have a WoW account. Although these days with the movies, probably people have seen that too. So, you know, why? There hasn't really been that kind of social event for furry, obviously. It's not exactly like it's mainstream yet. And I think what I'm trying to say is that it's possible that in some ways Second Life can begin to open up that kind of avenue for it. That there are people in SL that have never seen a furry before at all, or even heard of the word, but they're wearing one of our avatars. And that kind of floored me that there's a guy I ran into once wearing one of our foxes, and he had no idea what furries were. He just thought it looked pretty damn cool. And I was like, that's really interesting. It's kind of this accessibility, there's something to that. There's something beyond kind of what's happened to some of these other kind of furry things. So I mean, it hasn't happened to date. So I mean, what are we looking from? Where did we start out with some of these things? Well, we started out with text. You know, obviously.
You're making me feel old.
That's still good.
But I mean, it's a lot of these. I mean, the furry community, as it forms now, in a lot of cases, started in these text forums. These really closed communities. You had to have a password and log in. You had to, log in as a guest and beg for one. And it really it was nice. It's kind of an incubation area. It was kind of more private. People would not be there if they weren't interested in it. You know what I mean? Why would you log on to Furry Muck if you're not a furry? Why would you log in to Tapestries or some of these other things if you're not interested in it already? It's nice that it helps community form, but it's not exactly kind of breakthrough. It's not like you're going to reach the masses this way. So, I mean, things advanced a little bit. We got tech, advanced maybe. I don't know. Some people would argue the point, but you had two-dimensional graphics. You had things where the visuals are no longer. You don't have to try and imagine the visuals. And obviously, if you're a furry, chances are you don't have a problem with that. But there's a lot of people who don't necessarily want to read 15 pages when they look at something. They want to just be able to look at it and see for themselves. So I mean, there are certain steps in that direction. But again, it's kind of isolated. It's a very closed kind of community. You're not going to go there randomly. You're going to either know what it is and go and look for yourself, or you're just never going to find it. So, again, not the best outreach out there. There's been the web, which has obviously its own groups. There's MySpace. There's other things, and again, it's broadened things a lot. There are definitely more furries now than there were back before these kinds of tools became available for expression. But again, it's kind of niche still. You're not going to stumble across it. I mean, God, on the web, there's probably 87 trillion websites now, so it's not like you're going to randomly, join a furry community without realizing it, out there. The chances of you even stumbling across it, unless you're either there to join it or there to attack it, are probably pretty low. So
more likely to find a porn site.
yeah. So saying, those aren't really the most engaging. But there's this, there is Second Life, which is just a little different. It's 3D, it's open, it's kind of a single world where you can literally get in one day and start walking, and probably at this point, 2 days later, you'll hit the other side of the continent and go, wow, that was a whole lot of crap I just, There's definitely, there's some advantages that Second Life has that a lot of these other more closed communities don't. And those are probably playing into that kind of beginning to open the fandom a little bit, because there are just more ways to access furriness on Second Life. There's more ways that you may have never seen anything, but all of a sudden you're dancing in a club and poof, there's a fox dancing next to you. That was back when it wasn't worth as much actually. Well, you have to understand, that's about how much I pay every month for it.
Oh, yeah, that's when they gave you money.
Yeah, I remember back in the day they told you, a friend told me, you made Linden's on how high your ratings were.
Yep, but that was capped. In other words, that was only up to 3,500 lindens, because if you had more than that, you didn't need any money. So if you had 500 lindens, they would fill you up to 3,500 if you had enough ratings, but they wouldn't give you any more than that. No one should have had more than 3,500 linden at the time. So things have changed a little since then. Of course, you have to remember also, it cost $10 every prim you wanted to register at the time, too, or attach.
But back then, you actually had to have a credit card in order to get an account.
Yes, it was a closed account system. And that's changed. Maybe for the better, maybe for the worse in some ways. You know, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I mean, really did strike me is that here's this world now where anyone can wander into almost anything. I mean, you can literally go from one sin to the next, and you can be a cowboy, you can be a samurai, you can be a furry, you can be something naked, tied up straps to a wall. I'm not really sure what it was. So, you know, it is a furry cultural medium. Obviously, we're here, everyone knows about it, so it's not like, you know, it has become a home. So, you know, my idea is, what can we do here with this home we have to start, or maybe not start, but help continue to break down some of the other misconceptions and stereotypes? And, you know, like, what do you mean by furry stereotypes? Well, there are a few.
Oh my
We've always had a, you know, there's a certain problem. I mean, obviously, I'm here up at the front giving a panel. Well, you know, what my parents ask, where are you going this weekend? What do I tell them? You know what I mean? I don't want to give them the wrong impression, and there's been enough stuff out there that if I say, oh, I'm going to give a panel at FurryCon, that, you know, they may think something else is going on other than just what's happening here. So, I mean, there's obviously stereotypes out there. There's those news-ertainment kind of shows, the MTVs, the CSIs, where, you know what I mean, oh my God, let's expose this corner of what's going on, but they're doing it for their own ratings. There's no one holding them accountable to how honest they are or how true what they're saying is. So, I mean, but even outside that, even if you kind of more mainstream stuff, I mean, I ran across this one day on Penny Arcade, and man, they're cool guys. I've actually talked to them once or twice, and I never had a problem with them, but it seems like they have a problem with furries. And I was going, why? How could they? I mean, they probably never even met them. So how do they have a problem with them?
They like Ninja Turtles.
That's an exception.
Oh.
They're ninjas and also turtles. They were
Also ninjas.
But I mean, it's one of those things where they don't really hate you. They don't really hate me. They don't even know us.
It brings
But
ratings.
they have this kind of opinion, or this auspice of this group they don't like. But maybe it's really what it is they don't like the auspice, and when they don't like the things surrounding it, they don't really know what's deeper inside. And that's again where the whole thing that I was talking about, Second Life. You know what I mean? Like if they met us and then they met me, I don't think they hate me. I don't think they dislike me. I just think they just haven't really had the chance to get past whatever stereotypes and whatever blogs and forums they've run into over the years on the web. So, you know, I kind of want to give an example of this kind of thing where I think maybe some of this can start, which is, you know, let's set up this hypothetical scenario where you're walking down, you know, you had a date for a convention and you're going to go to it, but it turns out you actually got the wrong month. So you show up at the con and there's a whole bunch of Hare Krishnas dancing around. Now, you don't know much about the Hare Krishna group. I certainly don't. So, you know, I'm observing and I don't really know what's going on. But one thing I noticed, weirdly enough, is like they're all drinking these mango smoothies. And I'm going, wow, what is it about Hare Krishnas that makes them drink mango smoothies? And I began to build this whole thing in my mind about where the mango smoothies fit into their beliefs and how integral and how much every Hare Krishna must love these mango smoothies.
They're healthy and taste good.
So it's one of those things where I start building this whole framework here, and then I go back the next month to the actual con I meant to be at, and I noticed something I may have missed earlier, which is that there just happens to have been a buyout at the concession stand, and there's only one place you can go to get any drink at all. So what does this mean is that it wasn't that the Hare Krishnas like mango smoothies, it's just that I happened to stumble on a particular case where there was a Hare Krishna and a mango smoothie in his hand. And I think that's, in a lot of cases, what happens. It's kind of like an alien hypothesis, where if there's a culture you don't understand and you know nothing about, it's really easy to take a piece of it and kind of expand it out and go, that's what they're all about, obviously, because I just saw this one guy doing it. And I think that's probably what's happened with the furry fandom. I mean, it's every possible thing out there. I'm sure somebody's written a webcomic about, or somebody's made a picture and posted it on the Fur Affinity or some other thing. I mean, it's not like this stuff isn't out there, but it's certainly not pervasive, and it's certainly not the focus of the fandom. But, you know, if you've never encountered anything other than a picture like that, that may not be your perception. And again, I think that's where Second Life can kind of come in a little more handy and a little more useful. It's something that, you know, you have that walking. It's not like Second Life doesn't have problems. I mean, it obviously has its own stereotypes, and again, they're not all completely found out. I mean, if you teleport in somewhere random, chances are you're going to see things you may not have wanted to see, and you may not have an easy time forgetting.
At least there's a few good places.
In fact, this is actually a place just yesterday, just a couple days ago, somebody goes, oh, this is a perfect place for one of your vendors. And I just went, no, please. There was something shooting blood down below that. I don't even want to go into what that was. But, so, I mean, Second Life has its own kind of stigmas. But one interesting thing is, because of that, there's a lot of people that already kind of understand what we're going through. They already know what it's like to have, oh my God, it's all about sex. If it's not for them, they're probably not really fond of that reputation. So they may be able to help see past that in furrydom. Like, it's not all about sex either. Yeah, there's a furry sex scene there, but there's 16 other sims right next to it where they're doing all kinds of things, and no one's going to fox it at all. So, you know, there is this kind of wide base of Second Life stuff going on. There's a lot of it pretty crazy, a lot of it pretty normal, and some of it's furry and some of it's not. I think people in Second Life seem like they're more ready to be able to just separate that out. Again,
I think this particular plan's like
let's say
50
a
or
furry
60.
monk or some other specific furry thing where everything in it is associated with furry, oh my God. In Second Life, there really isn't that direct correlation. There is stuff going on, but it's not necessarily assumed that that's because it's furry, or, you know, why, oh my God, all furries are doing it. It's just, we've never really run across that opinion in 5 years being it. And it's something where, you know, it's still common in other things too. I mean, there's green women in Second Life, but we don't all assume they're going to be making out with starship captains. But there are other genres where that seems to be the more normal assumption of it. So I mean, it is certainly, the Second Life seems like in general like it is just pushing people to be more open, because there's so much stuff to see and so much stuff to experience. It's harder to kind of cornerhole and pigeonhole it all down into one little thing and say that's what it is. So that kind of openness is really, it's working in our favor there. But it's not like also there aren't furry stereotypes, and there aren't people out there who are going to be perpetuating them even in Second Life. I mean, it's not, you know, I'm sure in Second Life we've all seen the kind of special people out there. I believe it's a fez. I believe it's actually a fez, if you're curious. It's a writer renner. You know, these, and even just standing out on our platform, it's a PG area. We're just talking about, like, so, I mean, it's just amazing the amount of crazy stuff we'll get people doing and blaming on us when we're just sitting around talking about computers and talking about the weather or whatever's going on. So, I mean, and it is kind of part of the weakness of Second Life is that, you know, it is open. There's nothing to stop these people. And Linden Lab themselves don't really have a way of stopping these people anymore, because they don't have control of the client. They don't have control of the user base. Anyone can log in with any character they want at any time. But at the same time...
But in truth, isn't that what Second Life is all about?
That's what I'm saying. Like, at the same time, that is the same kind of thing that's led this kind of openness to happen in the first place. People can just log in. There's not a big barrier. You don't have to spend $100. You don't have to log in as a guest and beg to be given an account or anything. Anyone can just go to the page and create any account at all. And yeah, that is going to attract a certain group of 20 idiots who are going to sit there and try and ruin your day. That maybe if you're in a muck, you have the control and you have the ability to kind of lock them out forever and never see them again.
Don't forget our most favorite fans.
Okay, you had to bring it up, didn't you?
Yeah. I mean, it's just, it's one of those things where I think in the end, if you look at the trade-offs you're making, you know, you have to deal with certain people that are going to be trying to ruin your day every so often. It's usually not like a continuous thing. But at the same time, we are getting this really broad exposure. I mean, like I said, my avatar is on freaking Fox News. That's not something I ever would have expected to see. And it's been on a lot more than that. There's been all kinds of documentaries and things that just wander through. I don't know if any of you saw that Cinemax world with Moldov Alva, I think his name was. And it's this gigantic, you know, it's on Cinemax. They aired like 10 parts of it. And I think they even have it on DVD now. But at some point, it was just him experiencing Second Life, and he wandered through our area as part of the documentary. And I just thought that was really neat. That he literally could just wander through our area. They didn't make a big deal out of it. He just said, wow, these are kind of interesting people. Look at them and look what they're choosing to do with themselves. And I think it's interesting that that is a choice that's available. And that is something that I wish, you know, that we've made that kind of decision for. So, I mean, what are we left with? We have this big area in Second Life. And what's cool is people can stumble across it. We have any number of people, day in and day out, who just kind of wander in and go, well, look at these crazy guys. And they hang out. Maybe they even buy an avatar. Maybe they eventually become some crazy furry who's into everything possible you can think of. And, you know, we've seen that happen too. But, you know, there's no pressure. And one of the nice things is that the cost of entry is so low because of SL. It's something where on any given day, anybody can walk up and they can get free avatars. There's a couple of furries that you can just start with from the Lindens. And, you know, there's other ones out there that are free too, and there's other ones that you could easily buy for, you know, chump change. I mean, like 4 figures, not even 4 figures if you count decimal places. You know, these things are cheap. Obviously, if you have a suit here, these things are not cheap in real life. You know, the barrier, if you want to dress up like a character that you have in your mind in real life, is thousands of dollars. The barrier in SL,
Tell me about it.
like, honestly, you know, it costs less than going on a dinner date with, like, hamburger royalty. You know what I mean? So.
You had to put that in there. Now I want Burger King.
And that was kind of our idea when we made these first vended avatars. We originally were doing them custom made, just like suits. Every person, we'd take dozens of hours and build every person their suit. And when there were 300 people in the world, that kind of worked, because 3 of them wanted suits, and that was cool. And then there were 30,000 people in the world, and 30 of them wanted the avatars, and that was less cool. Then there was 300,000 people in the world, and now 300 people want them, and that's less cool. And after a certain point, we had to stop that. We had to come up with a different idea, which was that vended avatar. And the idea was, for just $1 or $2, much less than a custom anything would cost, you can just get a suit, or, you know, an av, as they're called in SL, and you can wander around and have fun with it. And those first few days, we sold so many that we weren't even expecting, just because it became cool. It was just, oh my God, here's this new thing in SL. You got to try it. Get a suit on. Become a bunny. And you'd be surprised how many of those people are still bunnies to this day, even though they had no interaction with the furry family.
They're modifiable, so like even though you get like candy cutter kind of rendered avatars, you can change it however you want.
And that was absolutely true right from the very beginning. When we were doing this, we had to figure, no one had ever done this before, we had to figure out things like permissions. Well, yeah, if you give somebody mod permission, they can do all kinds of weird stuff to you. And they can make all kinds of horrific things and take pictures of them and post them on the net. And we've seen that happen. But at the same time, there's also hundreds of people who can just do really cool things to them. And we really did not want to deny them that opportunity. So, I mean, when we set that kind of standard and that precedent where you have full rights to mod it, you have full rights to make copies for yourself. And, you know, we've seen that kind of thing over and over again, where every new vendor that comes up, well, most of them, there's always a few that think they know better, but most of the people out there who make avatars are going to do the same thing. They're going to open that up so that people can personalize them and make them more themselves. So, you know, if you look at this, SL overall really has helped the furry fandom. I mean, it has made it broader. We're on the news in ways that are not horrific. We're on other TV shows and ways that may be perfect, but less so. I mean, hey, the bunny was a main character in the CSI, and they didn't make too much of a big deal about that. But, you know, it is just something that it's interesting, that especially because of the rest of the community. There's all these other places, like the shelter, the Ivory Tower. They're dealing with some of the same stigmas that we are.
And Dragon Valley Estate.
The guy who runs the shelter, what's he going to tell his parents he's doing, you know, when they're asking where all his time is? He's, you know, if he says Second Life, he's probably going to get some
Ivory Tower has a stigma.
You know, it is interesting, and I do hope that we keep growing in SL, and I do hope we can, you know, learn to live with the SL community, because in a lot of ways, the SL community isn't that different from the fur community. And we've seen a lot of seeding both ways. There's a lot of furries now who are dedicated to the SL community, and there's a lot of Second Lifers who are finding out they're kind of dedicated to the furry community. I mean, I don't know how many of you guys where this is your first con. I know there's probably a couple. And, I mean, did you come here because of things you saw on Second Life or Middle
I
Second
mean, I
Life?
came fur because of friends telling me about the coronavirus, and I bought one that was more than a year ago, and I wouldn't be here had I not known it.
And yeah, that's awesome. That's something, like I said, we're definitely seeing a lot of that. That's something that's like to continue. You know, I'm going to kind of end my little talk here, trying to stay real loud because I'm already beginning to feel my voice start to go a little crazy. But I'll just say, like, you know, they're the first, or maybe not the first, but they're very early. I want more. You know what I mean? I want us to kind of expand out more, get more people trying the avatars, get more people trying other things. Thank you. Along with that, I have a bunch of coupons here. I'm sorry, normally we like to bring more free little whatever to give away, stickers and buttons. So we bought a house, and somehow they ended up in a box that is in some trans-dimensional portal that I haven't been able to track down in one of our closets still. So I have a whole bunch of these here. If anyone would like them, they're more than welcome to them. Just come up and talk to me. What I'd really like to have happen, if possible, is if you already have an avatar in SL, please give one of these to a friend who doesn't. Or, you know, just read it. You don't have to give it to them in real life, obviously. There's just a code. You can read it to them. But, you know, I would like to make things in general more accessible. I would like us to spend maybe not all our time in SL, but occasionally if somebody walks by, somebody in a human ad, try and give them a good impression. Try and talk with them occasionally.
And hope they don't know how to draw transparency.
No, these people don't ever actually do that. That's dishonest.
That's kind of my prepared little talk here. I don't know if anybody else has anything, any questions they'd like to ask us, any other random things they'd like to mention. Obviously, stuff like the tech, it is good to hear that they are working on getting bigger prims. Obviously, our tree has a lot of prims that we'd like to make bigger, but, you know, it's hard to make a 90-foot tree when you're not allowed to use mega prims because you're on the mainland. So,
I already talked to a couple of others there. They get the max size probably 15 or 20. They're not sure if the government should go all the way up to 20 because on 512 their parcel of mainland.
it goes out every side.
It goes over the sides.
Yeah.
Go over the sides of it.
Yep.
If we were going to start today and we were going to build up a community, we would have obviously chosen the Provident Islands. The problem was we started before they existed. So, I mean, you know, when we started out, there was no Provident Island. There was just SL, and it was just mainland. So, I mean, it's kind of tough now where we have, I believe, 4 Sims worth of mainland land. And that's, if you want to look at buying that number of islands, that's not cheap. That's like a small imported car.
What about 30 some islands?
That means you're insane.
37, I can't write.
And also,
Yep.
we have history. Our roots are kind of in those Sims. It feels like home. You know, it would be really hard. We talked about it at times with some griefing. You know, it kind of comes in waves. There'll be a wave where the griefers find some new exploit, some new thing they can do that's really screwing with you. And it's really hellish for a couple of weeks until Windows then come back and fix that. I mean, every time that's happened, we've had a talk like, is this the time? Do we have to give up and do we have to move to an island now? And it is interesting, at some point when you're talking with like Robin and Phil during one of the Second Life cons, we're kind of, in a way, their benchmark for the mainland. As long as we stay there, there's kind of, they consider this kind of hope. You know, you can't have a viable community there. And if we were forced to leave, they would have to really begin to reconcile what's going on. And that's also been like, maybe we should just leave on purpose. You know, the mainland is still livable. It is still something that, you know, we've really taken a lot of pride in being kind of the premier community, furry or otherwise. I mean, we're just one of the oldest mainland community NSL periods at this point, pretty much. I mean, forget any of the caveats and furry and whatever else you want to throw in front of it. You know what I mean? Like, we're kind of an example of how it has worked and how it hopefully will continue.
I would like to say right now, let's take a few minutes silence to mourn the loss of Taco Taco.
It's a long time ago.
Well, it's my first story.
Oh!
Go outside.
Yeah, it was kind of unfortunate. There was some real life stuff going on, and in the end, you know, the scene was getting, islands especially getting more offensive and all the problems. I missed go get it. Of course, shortly after that, there wasn't dwell anymore, and it was traffic, so it had to be traffic get now or something. Well, now they're getting into traffic too, so I don't know if we search ranking yet or something.
Like they had, if there was a furry avatar, they had a couple that we didn't know about.
Yeah, and there's still, I mean, obviously, Rocket City has a lot of vendors. They had to move their whole area now because they couldn't have the vendors in the hotel anymore because there just isn't enough room in the hotel to hold all the furry vendors that are out there. And North Star obviously is another gigantic one. I love their ball design, by the way. They're the only one I know where you can stand in almost any part of the ball and see every vendor there. And that I thought was really cool.
I that's when before when you cross the sin line. Oh my God! I'm on your floor.
Again, the same way we handled the last one, is just we try and talk with people. We, you know, when somebody copies something of ours, I try and get them aside, and I try and just talk to them about it. And we've had honestly, the scariest thing for us has always been the team grid, mostly because we can't talk with them. I'll get my account data. You know, I'm not allowed to even see it or look at it, but they're some of the worst copiers around because they can't even get the main grid stuff. So some kid, you know, has a fake account, dumps all the crap, uploads it on the team grid, goes, look how cool I am. And then all of a sudden you got 500 cheetahs running around that are just rips right off yours. So, you know, the Lindens have helped us a little bit there. It's kind of, it's tricky for them because again, we're not even supposed to know that it's happening. Going back and forth like that has been a problem. But, you know, it's hit everybody differently. One of the things we were a little encouraged by is the new CEO. Seems like he is beginning to stand a little more for the content in Second Life. And you know, not that he's abandoning the technology, but before, we always got the impression talking with, you know, Phil and Corey and these other guys that for them it was all about the technology. And, you know, everything else is kind of secondary. Yeah, it's kind of cool you made a box with it, but that's not really what this is about. This is about our servers and our code and our software. And it seems like they're beginning to realize that that's nice, but that's not really paying the bills. What's paying the bills is the world. And the world is built on content. Some of it free, some of it not. And, you know, it's nice to see them in general taking a little bit more kind of a protectionist stance against that and actually following up on some of these DFCA reports and actually removing accounts of people that are really causing problems. Anybody else? Anything? Hey.
I think that one of the things that bothers, well, maybe the social hangout is very a lot of the places are still a little ignorant, and I find that one of the best things is when you start getting people making blogs and it's a soup industry, but they're really about something else as well. So you have like a multi-convention shooter. Yeah, it's full of furries, but at the same time we're into like.
And that's interestingly kind of how we are actually in Luskwood. Hi. It is. We actually never started out as a furry area at all. We wanted a giant freaking tree.